Hello, I'm Anand Raghavan, co-founder and chief product officer at Armorblox. DJ and I started Armorblox with one singular mission. How do you protect people inside of organizations from being compromised by attackers? Over the years, attacks evolved from attacking the network to attacking the most valuable assets inside of an organization, the people. How do you ensure that these humans are not being tricked into doing things that they should not be doing? When we started Armorblox, the next best thing we had to think about and solve for was who do we find as the leader of our security organization to make sure that our own security is well taken care of. That's when we reached out to Brian Johnson and said, hey Brian, would you like to come and help us here at Armorblox? Hi Brian.
Hey Don.
Welcome.
Thanks.
So this is our Humans of Cybersecurity video series. And the goal here is to focus on the human behind the CISO. From all of your interviews, from the interviews that we see of other CISOs that we work with, we know a lot about the technical aspects of your job. And our focus in this series is to try to get a sense of what drives you as human beings, what brought you into cybersecurity.
That's going to be great. I think it's really going to help talk to the security in general about who are they afterwards? What keeps them motivated? What do they do to relieve stress and keep sharp?
And it's about what brought them into cybersecurity. I mean, some of them that we know served in the military before. Some of them have really fascinating hobbies outside of work.
I think it's going to be a wide range of people to talk to.
Yeah. So let's go get the show on the road. Hi, Brian. Welcome. You're the first guest on our Humans of Cybersecurity show.
Thanks for having me on. Great to be here.
Yeah. So as we discussed, the goal of the show is to talk about cybersecurity leaders, their backgrounds, how they got into this career. So with you, that's where I wanted to get started with. What got you here? What do you do? And who's Brian?
How did I get here? It's definitely an interesting thing for security, right? So like we always talk about in security, especially for people like me who came up through the networking space, is sometimes security chooses you, right? It's not like the times that we came up, it wasn't like it was a career goal to go into cybersecurity, or we didn't even know that was a career choice. When the first .com boom came up, we started doing more things in the programming space, and all of a sudden there was people misusing computers, right? Or gaining an advantage, or in my time stealing grades was a big deal, right?
Oh, really?
So that was the first aspect of there's hacking. That's kind of where the genesis of my interaction came into that. Wasn't a choice. We just kind of went through that, found something interesting to do, and then just kind of rolled with it, and it became this large industry, something we never thought would ever happen.
And so double clicking into that a little bit. So what got you into computers? How old were you when you got a computer? What kind of things
Luckily,
were you doing?
I came up in the age of computers are already kind of going there in there. Grade school, we had access to computers. Then high school, really getting into computers, we had more access to more machines, to learning basic kind of programming languages. But I think the interesting thing at the time was who could change their grades on the computer system when we first got them networked together. That was always a big challenge. I grew up in the Bay Area. So as we had access to Lawrence Livermore Labs and sending code up there to be, compiled and built, and that kind of was the first real, hook into getting us interested in, computer science.
And was your family from a technical background too?
Not in the slightest, right? Computers. The idea of talking to my parents of what we're going to be able to do is these things. They're interested, and they were very positive on it, but nobody knew it was going to be as big, as it's become.
And okay, so you did that, and then you went and did engineering. What
really started building security networks. It was the first thing that we started to do, right? So this is the time that internet's really exploding. We have the eBays and the Ciscos and all that kind of stuff are really coming up. So that was really the first iterations to do that, and installing the first firewalls, right, to really kind of keep people out. People were misusing network technologies and getting through things, and how is that going to be weaponized and used in a negative way. If you could connect computers together, and how do you keep those transactions safe? That's really where we started doing that. And it was really the frontier of, those kind of attack methodologies. Nobody had really thought about that from a risk business perspective. And this was the genesis of that just starting. You couldn't go to school to learn this. It was kind of, you did it in the field, you learned on the job, you iterated quickly and changed.
And I tie that back to your dad's background as well. He was in the military.
Well, I come from a large a family with a lot of service background, right? So that's the Navy, whether that was my dad or grandfather, that aspect. The idea of being service oriented has always been a, big thing, in my family. So coming up, I think most of us in the security field, we got into it because we're mission oriented, right? We wanted to help. We wanted to make things secure and safe. Idea of service was always, a tantamount aspect of my family.
And this aspect of physical security in the cyber world also came back later on in your career at Uber.
100%.
Right?
So we started seeing, cyber was one aspect. We're trying to do transactions, but also in the physical world, started transacting in the same space, right? So whether that was Uber, whether that was life safety in the government side, the idea of, this cyber aspect, these things we're trying to do now affecting people directly, right? So we can think of the number of things now that we kind of take for granted a little bit, whether that's autonomous cars or how much, of airplane is ran, by computers these days. All those things have been able to been, attacked. So now we're kind of crossing the line into life safety versus just a cyber attack. And that line is super gray now.
And that also maybe reflects upon, like, one of the things I've noticed about you is you never get stressed out. I mean, you're always calm, right? How do you do that?
I think that's a compliment. So thanks. We always try to stay calm, right? So I think it's important to stay calm, especially in stressful situations, right? Decisions have to be made at speed. You have to keep the rest of the team calm. One person kind of freaking out, that expands quickly into the rest of the team. And then you stop making rational decisions and you start making, emotional based kind of the quick decisions. And that doesn't always lead down, the best path, right? So being calm, being precise in what you're trying to do, communicating effectively, those are the things that we've found after a number of times of being through incidents and aspects, that cyber impact has a physical attribution that can really affect life safety. And that's really more stressful. Yes, it's bad when something cyber or system gets taken down or data loss is horrible, but life safety and having somebody be able to go home at the end of the day, I think is a key thing that really drives us.
And you were also at Netflix during the Chaos Monkeys days, right? What was that like? What was the time at Netflix like?
Yeah, I think I was, this is when Netflix was just getting into the streaming business. Was the streaming business going to be a thing? Was it not going to be a thing? We take it for granted now because everybody streams. But you have to remember at the time, this was a new aspect. Was the internet going to be robust enough to handle streaming? How are we going to get that through? So it was a whole new function that's, in the cloud. How do we service that many people across the globe? It still hadn't been done yet. So it was a definitely interesting time to be there.
And it was the early days of AWS and you were running
the
on
super
AWS.
Early days of AWS. We're just trying to figure out what that was going to be, how we're going to interact with it, would it scale, how could we scale it? A lot of things that we take for granted now hadn't been built yet. But at the time it was brand new and that was fun. It reminded me very much of the early networking days, the early aspects. So maybe that's why I gravitated to that, right? Because there was no book to read. You couldn't just do it. You had to iterate, you had to figure it out. You had to fail a lot, right? And then take those failures and turn them into wins.
And right after that, you were with two companies, both of which are public companies now, Upwork and Lending Club. What was that like being CISO in a company that is getting ready to go public and all the paperwork and all of that?
I think it was great. It was a great learning experience for me from coming from the tech side, to get into finance. I never thought that was the space I would get into, but I, was asked to come and, help build a digital wallet technology and secure it, and build it out to make sure it was secure to, transact, billions of dollars in business on. So that was a great thing to do at scale. We spent a lot of time making sure that was going to be, the right thing to do, right? So I think going public is always exciting. The stress around that and excitement and, seeing the company name come up on the ticker for the first day and everybody's excitement is, it's a great thing to be involved in.
One of the things I've known about you, Brian, is the time that you spend mentoring and advising and helping people start their careers in cybersecurity or working with startups. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the best things that's really fulfills me is really helping new people get into the space. We have such a wide gap of the number of seats we have to fill and experts that we need compared to what we currently have, right? So helping mentor either young people or people who want to get into the space has been super fulfilling, right? So there's been no handbook about how to do this, right? So it's really our first iterations of doing that. We're now getting to the second and third generations of security, experts kind of, coming in and helping and doing that. I think we've widened the base. We're getting more people in and more people know that this is a career path they can actually, be fulfilled in.
On that note, an interesting question for you. If you were not in cybersecurity, what would you be doing?
I think if I was going to do something else, I think it would probably do more in the creative aspects, but still using computers, creating, special effects or, creating animations or doing something in that space would probably be the area that I would be in.
Take a different job at Netflix.
That's on the creative side. That'd be a way different aspect, right? So
thanks, Brian, for this really fun conversation about your background, about telling us more about who you are, what drives you, what motivates you. I know I get to work with you every day, and it's always been a pleasure. And it's been amazing listening to your story for our viewers as well. Thanks,
Thanks,
so much.
Thanks for the questions.